believe one, Mr. Speaker. It is Indigenous History Month, so let's take a moment to acknowledge the history of this land. New Brunswick is on the unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Mi'kmaq, Wolastoqiyik, and Passamaquoddy peoples. And, Mr. Speaker, despite the Higgs government and the Minister of Local Government rushing through local governance reform and discouraging Indigenous names, there are other name change requests that this government needs to address. For example, the St. John River needs to be returned to its original name, the Wolastoq, and there are still 7 locations in this province that use the derogatory S word and need to be changed. My question is for the Minister of Tourism, Heritage and Culture. When will the Wolastoq return to its original name, and when will the racist S word be removed from our maps?
Minister of Tourism, Heritage and Culture.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for the question. I do appreciate the opportunity to speak to that. Absolutely, the derogatory names that we're seeing across the province are absolutely unacceptable, and it's something that we're addressing now. We've had conversations with all of the First Nations communities. They have asked for, we've asked for names for the specific community that you're talking about, the S name you just referred to. And they've asked, some of the First Nations communities have asked for an extension of 1 month to provide other names for that. So I will, that is unfolding, and it's successful so far.
The Deputy Member Cook Centre Mark.
Well, and Mr. Speaker, I'm glad to hear there's finally movement on removing the S word from our maps. I would like to hear an update on the Wolastoq, because that is a long-standing issue. And it would be nice to see a sense of urgency on that and on other things, and political will from the Higgs government to show that they have a commitment to truth and reconciliation, because their track record doesn't show one. And you have the Minister of Aboriginal Affairs advocating against the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, the Minister of Finance suddenly cancelling agreements with no heads up, the Premier refusing to have an Indigenous-led independent inquiry into systemic racism. One simple measure this government could take to move towards reconciliation is to formally recognize the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation on September 30th, just as many provinces and municipalities within our province have done. Will the Minister of Post-Secondary Education, Training and Labour be bringing legislation to make this a provincial holiday before the legislature adjourns for the summer next week?
The Minister of Aboriginal Affairs.
Thank you to the member opposite for the question. And I just want to apprise the House, there's been lots of work going on with respect to First Nations. And I think that, I've offered before during our discussions to come into the department so we can apprise you of all the work. And I don't know how many in the House have actually read the TRC report and the work that's been done, but we've worked on 27 of the 31 recommendations that the province is responsible for. That's the story. The other thing I wanted to mention that I think is very important is every single week we're in meetings with First Nations, every one of the First Nations right across the province. And here's the kind of stuff that we're talking about that's very important to them. Justice reforms, the Gladue reports, Indigenous policing, restorative justice, court support worker programs, Mr. Speaker, rematriation and repatriation of their artifacts and their human remains, toponymy, as my colleague just mentioned, economic development. They need to be part of that equation.
Thank you, Minister.